this video, we are going to learn about assessment of personality. Earlier, we learned about personality and the different theories that explain personality. In this unit, we will learn how to assess the personality. One's behaviors, relationship with others, and their social interactions all are influenced by one's personality. So it becomes crucial to know that how one can assess their personality to understand its implications in different aspects of our lives. Okay, so moving on, we will learn about the objectives of this unit. In this unit, we will learn about the concept of psychological assessment, which will answer the questions like what is psychological assessment, why do we need to do a psychological assessment, and what are the principles of psychological assessments? What are the properties of good test? What are the ethics of psychological assessments? Then we will move ahead with the uses of personality assessments. What are various methods of personality assessments, which include observation, interviews, personality inventories, rating scales, situational tests, behavioral data, and projective techniques. Moving ahead with the next slide. What is psychological assessment? So we know some features or aspects that we can relate to a specific behavior in any individuals. Color of the cornea is related to the smartness of the individual. And we have also learned about the assumptions that have no scientific support, but they are myths. Okay, so how do we know that personality characters? What are the personality characteristics of the people? Like, how do we measure these differences? And individuals tend to differ in their interests, achievements, intelligence, moods, personality, and motives. So to find out these differences, we as psychologists use psychological assessment. This psychological assessment or measurement of individual differences follows a systematic procedure. It is carried out in a systematic manner, and also it fulfills the essential criteria, which is being reliable and being valid. Thus, psychological assessment can be defined as a scientific and standardized method of drawing conclusions about aspects of an individual, such as motives, social traits, adjustments, attitudes, and interests. Moving on with the next slide. Why? Why is the need for the psychological assessments? Simply to understand its implications in our lives. It also helps us to develop, modify, and improve our personality for greater effectiveness in our functioning. Personality is conceptualized by various theories, as we have learned in the previous unit, and it also has implications on the way how personality is assessed. It also helps in measuring various aspects of human development and behavior. It also helps the psychologists to describe, explain, and predict human behavior. It helps in decision making, and also it provides guidance and counseling. It is used by psychologists in various fields. As we know, psychological assessments are used in education, career, clinical, and organizational setups. It has also relevance in the area of social psychology, neuropsychology, forensic psychology, and practically every other branch of psychology. As you know, one should, psychologist measures human behavior, and it is the first step, or it is the basic step to study how human behaves. Okay, so psychological assessments are very important. Okay, moving ahead with the next slide. Some principles of psychological assessment. So we have learned that what is psychological assessment. Why do we need a psychological assessment? Now we will understand about the principles of psychological assessments. What are these principles? Psychological assessment should be comprehensive and holistic. It should be systematic. It should be ongoing. It should be accurate, and it should be confidential. So what do we understand by comprehensive and holistic? The word comprehensive can be understood as including all of the aspects of a psychological assessment. Like if you are assessing a personality, of an individual using a psychological assessment, so it should include all the aspects of the personality. Okay, holistic approach is characterized by the belief that parts of a thing is interconnected. Okay, and it cannot be understood unless and until it is considered as a whole. So personality can only be understood as a whole, not as its parts. Thus, all the relevant aspects need to be taken into account while assessing a personality. Okay, and we should and as taking a holistic approach, one should integrate all the aspects of individual's life. Okay, the socio-cultural context of the individuals also need to be considered. Moving ahead with the next principle is psychological assessment should be systematic. Okay, assessment is a systematic process which include planning of how, why, and what to assess. The steps in the assessment processes involve deciding the objective of assessment, identifying the assessment methods, achieve the identified objectives, administering the assessment tools, collection of data, scoring and interpretation, integrating data from different sources to get a holistic picture and formulating the implications of the assessment, okay, in the various areas of client's life. Okay, psychological assessment should be ongoing. Okay, it is not a one-time activity. It needs to be an ongoing assessment. Okay, in order to capture the dynamic nature of human behavior, as episodic assessment may not reflect the true nature of the individual. Okay, psychological assessments should be accurate. Okay, in what terms? In terms of assessing what it intends to measure. Okay, personality assessment should measure only the aspect of personality. Intelligence measures should only assess the intelligence. Okay, reliability and validity of a psychological assessment or test must be ensured. Okay, it should be confidential. Okay, whatever the findings and score interpretation of the assessment came, it should kept confidential. Okay, it should not be shared with anyone without the client's consent. Thus, we can say that psychological assessment is a scientific and standardized method of drawing conclusions about the aspects of an individual. Okay, moving ahead with the next slide. Now we will learn about the difference between a psychological test and a psychological assessment. So, according to NSPC, a psychological test is essentially an objective and standardized measure of a sample of a behavior. Okay, it is considered as a standardized tool and it provides uniform ways of administration, test instructions, and scoring. Whereas, on the other hand, assessment refers to a broad evaluation of the individuals. Okay, it includes psychological testing, surveys, observation, interview, history, demographic information about the client, and so on, to have a complete and comprehensive evaluation of an aspect or any particular behavior under the study. Moving ahead, it is used by psychologists for understanding or for assessing the behavior, attitude, and personality of the individual, and it also helps in drawing conclusions about it. It enables quantification of observations, thus it makes easy to make comparison across the population. Are we clear here? Moving ahead, what are the properties of a good test? To say that this psychological test is very good, it should be standardized, it should have norms, it should be reliable, and it should be valid. Standardization refers to the uniformity in administration of test, scoring, and interpretation of test responses. Why standardization is important? It is important as it ensures that there is no variation even if it administered by different researcher or a psychologist. Okay, a test should be standardized and it should not have it should not create a variation if it is applied or if it's administered by various psychologists or researchers or individuals. Okay, why this is necessary? So the respondent gets the same instructions regardless of how to take the test and how to answer it. Okay, moving ahead with the next property is norm. What is norm? A norm is a score obtained by the representative sample on which the test is developed initially. Norm can be said is a standard score which is used to make comparison. These test norms helps in providing information about high, low, and average performances. The scores of individual taking the test is compared with these norms. Okay, to make a comparison with the standardized sample. Okay, moving ahead, our reliability. Reliability is the consistency in the scores obtained by the individual on a test. Okay, it is important. The test should be reliable. Okay, it should not, it should have a really, great reliability, as it ensures that the responses of the individual on the test do not vary. Varied on what basis? If it is repeatedly administered to the same individual. Okay, what do we understand by the reliability now? Reliability is the consistency in the scores, even if it is, administered repeatedly in different situations. Okay, then we will say that the test is reliable. Okay, validity. Validity refers to how well a test measures what it intends to measure. Okay, validity ensures that an intelligence test is measuring only intelligence and not other component. I hope you are clear with the properties. What are the properties of a good test? Moving ahead are the ethics of psychological assessments. So American Psychological Association, APA, has put the following guidelines which needs to be observed by the psychologist or the researchers before they are going to administer any test. So what are these ethics? Psychological assessment should be done by trained psychologists only. It can be understood as, we want a person with training to, interpret our blood report or our any kind of physical examination report. We would not trust the individual without training to assess our medical reports. Okay, so the psychological assessment should be done only by psychologists, trained psychologists. Next, it is unethical to use a psychological test without having a formal degree or training in the same. Okay, the psychologist must know about the test, how it is administered, how the scoring and the interpretation is done. Okay, and it should also like he or she should also be familiar with the test items, how it is developed, and what are the norms of the test. It is very important for the psychologist to know about the test. Okay, moving ahead, the clients or the subjects or your patient, the clients must be informed or briefed about the intent and the use of the test. Okay, and it is done before the conduction of any psychological test. Okay, this is known as informed consent. Okay, it is really essential or say it is really important that one should take informed consent before any conduction of any psychological test. Okay, the client must be thorough about the purpose of testing and the intent behind the use of the test. The next, the client should also be informed about the confidentiality of the test findings. And as a psychologist or a researcher, we are required to provide and report the findings in very unbiased ways. We should not be biased while giving the report or findings. Also, how one communicate the test results is very important aspect of psychological assessments. Test results must be communicated in a very systematic and proper way. Okay. Moving ahead, as a psychologist, we need to ensure the confidentiality of the client. It is unethical to share the test reports of the client without their consent. Last but not least, it is also important to be aware of the test taking situations. Okay, how the test is taken and the in what environment it is taken, and what are the cultural and ethnic background of the test takers or the clients must be taken into account, as it may affect the test results. Okay, I hope you are understand with the ethics of the psychological assessment. Now we will learn about personality assessment and its uses. What is personality assessment? Personality assessment aims at measuring one's personality traits and its characteristics. Personality defines the individual and it constitutes an integral part of it. Hence, it is important that we know about one's personality or our personality, as it has various implications in various aspects of our lives. Like to improve oneself, to have a good social relationships, to interact with other individuals for a better health, to work, to increase our work performances, and so on. Personality is associated with various outcomes in various areas like education, career, counseling, clinical, and so on. So we can discuss about these applications of personality assessments. Personality assessments have a broad scope in schools and educational settings. How personality is related to the child's performance. Research studies have found that various personality traits have impact on educational achievement. Like the trait agreeableness is directly linked to the educational achievement, and personality traits have also been linked to bullying and other commonly occurring phenomena at school. Okay, traits like psychotism, children who is engaged in bullying or found bullies are said to have high on psychotism. This significant implication of early identification of potential bullies will help in preventing the bullying. Okay, personality assessment is also used in career decisions. It helps in finding out the best fit between our career requirements and our personality traits. It is also used clinically by psychologists to diagnose the occurrence or the diagnosis of personality disorders. It has implications for counseling too. Okay, as it is found, many researchers found that type A personality are more competitive, ambitious, and restlessness, which have compulsive tendencies, are aggressive and natures, and have the urgency of time, and always have the urgency of time. Such individuals have found more prone to the heart-related problems. Thus, personality have a direct impact on our health, and knowing one's personality, we can improve or modify their health behaviors and practices. Personality has impact on our health and well-being. It influences our health practices. And various studies have also found that there is a relationship between personality traits and our health. It has been found that personality traits like extroversion and consciousness is related to healthier lifestyles, and openness to experiences is related to more risky behaviors like taking drugs. Okay, moving ahead, it has also an important role in industrial and organizational setup, as we know that our personality affects us as well as others, being it like, and we spend major amount of time in the workplace with our colleagues, juniors, peers, and seniors. It is important to know our personality. It helps in increasing job performances, job satisfaction, and success in the organization. Okay, it is also importance in sports and military settings, as defense services require a person that can work in a typical conditions. With a typical work structure, it becomes important for the person to have a specific personality traits to go into the defense services. Hence, we can say that personality is an integral part of us, and hence the personality assessment has relevance and applications in many settings. And the importance of personality assessments cannot be denied. Moving ahead, are the methods of personality assessment. There are two types of personality assessments: direct methods and indirect methods. Direct methods includes observation, interviews, personality inventories or questionnaires, rating scales, behavioral data, situational tests. And indirect methods include projective techniques. Now we will learn about each of these methods separately. First method is observation. Observation is a direct method in which the individual is observed. It is viewing a pattern in one's behavior that explains cause and effect. Okay, it tends to offer a rich source of information about the individual who is being observed. Psychologist also makes an effort so to not disturb the natural conditions of the client, and it leads to two types of observation, which includes participant observation method and non-participant observation method. In participant observation method, a psychologist is a part of the group which is being observed. And in non-participant observation method, psychologists do not participate as a group member, rather they observe the client or the group from the distance. It can be understood with an example. Participant observation method will be, observing a teacher by sitting in his or her class, okay, along with the students. And whereas on the other hand, non-participant observation method would be seeing the teacher giving lecture to the children, or this giving lecture to the students from the CCTV camera, or from where the teacher cannot see. Okay, it is very useful in various situations. Moving ahead with the advantages and the limitations. Advantages, it offers first-hand information. Okay, so being participant in the observation or being non-participant in the observation, it helps in providing a first-hand information. You are not taking data or observation from any other source, but you are taking it yourself. So it tends to be more accurate. What are its limitations? Limitations includes observer bias and observer effect. What do you mean by observer bias? Observer bias is when a person who is observing has its own biases, beliefs, and value systems that may affect the observation process and the interpretation of the observation data. It can be understood with the example like if you're observing a teacher who is a male and you are a female. So as a female, you might have a bias that male teachers are not so good in explaining. This bias about the male teachers can affect your interpretation. Okay, observer effect is the effect on the person because of the fact of being observed. Okay, so in participant observation method, when you are a part of the whole class, and the teacher knows that that he or she is being observed, so he becomes conscious and may or may not show its natural responses or natural behavior. Okay, so this is the limitation of the observation method. Moving ahead is the interview. Interview is also a direct method in which the psychologist or any person is asked questions to the person or the interviewee about his or her behavior. Okay, but it is not like a job interview, because that is the formal interview. It is the interview which includes asking questions, related to his or her behaviors, his or her personal life. The interview may be semi-structured or even unstructured without having any specific questions. It can be understood as a flowing dialogue between the interviewer and interviewee. The goal of the interview is to collect information about the behavior and personality patterns of the individual. It allows, directly ask the question to the client. It also considered the psychologist must consider verbal as well as non-verbal aspects, like one's facial expressions, the tone of his or her voice, the body language, and how one is mannered, and the mannerism. Moving ahead, interview are of three types: structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. Structured interview consists of predefined set of questions. The answer to the questions in the structured interview may be one word or a single sentence. Okay, it is conducted to verify facts from the client. It is not very much time consuming, but it also fetches very less information. In structured interview, the interviewer has full control during the interview. Moving ahead, semi-structured interview. It is the best form of an interview because it allows psychologists to ask specific and detailed questions. And the psychologist is not bound to a pre-set of questions, but but the psychologist is free to ask whatever it is required. Okay, it allows psychologists to focus on specific information. It allows psychologists to explore the possible gray areas of the information, and it has the psychologists also have control over the interview. Unstructured interview, there are no set of questions in unstructured interview. Okay, one question leads to another, another leads to another, and forms a larger pool of information that can be collected from the client. The objective in the unstructured interview is to explore the information about the client. It is highly time consuming as the questions are not preset. So the psychologists have to learn and have to observe more and have to, form questions on the spot to fetch or to take out the information from the client. Okay, it may or may not fetch the relevant information. Moving ahead with the advantages and limitations of the interview. Advantages is a lot of relevant and in-depth information can be extracted, both verbal and non-verbal. Okay, and it offers a great flexibility. Interview is a very flexible form of psychological assessment. Whereas on the other hand, there are many limitations, which includes bias of interpretation, halo effect, interview subjectivity, lacks reliability and validity. It is highly time consuming and it is not easy to take interview. So what do you mean by bias of interpretation? It can be understood as, the interviewer may be biased, okay, and his or her beliefs or prejudices may affect the interpretation of the responses given by the client. Okay, halo effect can be understood as creating a positive impression. Okay, it is the client's need to be, create a positive first impression, and thus it can have, it generate effect, and hence it can affect the subsequent interaction with the client. Interviewer subjectivity, as the interviewer play a crucial role while interviewing and interpreting the responses, the subjectivity of the interviewer can affect the results. It also lacks reliability and validity. Reliability and validity are two properties of good psychological test. And with the case of unstructured and semi-structured interview, the reliability and validity become very less because of the subjective nature of the interviewer. Okay, and if the interview is structured, it may not provide much useful information. Okay, it is time consuming and it requires more time and energy, okay, to gain in-depth and useful information. And it is not easy to take an interview, as it is not only just about asking the questions. It is a skill and it requires trained interviewers. Moving ahead is the personality inventories. Personality inventories are the questionnaires or scales that consist of questions or statements, and the individual needs to answer these in a specified standardized format. It is also known as paper and pencil test and also known as self-reports. It is a widely used method of personality assessment. There are various personality inventories: Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, MMPI, 16 Personality Factor, 16PF, NEO-PI, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, California's Psychological Inventory, CPI, Eisenhower Personality Questionnaire, EPQ, Edwards Personal Preference Schedule, EPPS. Okay, we are going to discuss each of them in brief. The personality traits assess a number of traits. Okay, first is Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, MMPI. It is developed in 1930s and has been researched a lot and revised time to time. The latest version we used is MMPI 2 and the MMPI Adolescent. It is developed to assess psychopathology, and it is also used for both clinical and normal populations. Okay, it is also adapted on Indian population, and it has another name known as the Multiphasic Questionnaire, and it is adopted by Chattopadhyay, Som, and Bivas in 1993. MMPI-2, which is the current multiphasic inventory we use, it consists of 567 true-false items. It has 10 scales and 4 validity scales. It assesses the likelihood of the occurrence of any psychological disorder, and it is also modified and known as Minnesota Multiphasic Inventory 2 restructured form. Okay, it developed in 2008 and consists of 338 true or false items. Moving ahead is California Psychological Inventory, CPI. It is specifically developed for the normal adult population. MMPI is for, it can be assessed for both the population, normal or client, and it is specific, CPI is specifically designed or developed for the normal adult population. Recent version of CPI is the third edition that we use. It consists of 434 true or false items and has 20 scales. A short form of CPI is also there by Go in 2002, which has 260 items. Moving ahead is NEO-PIR, which is Neuroticism, Extroversion, Openness, Personality Inventory revised. It is widely used assessment of personality, which is developed by Costa and McCrae in 1995. As you can understand with the name itself, it is based on five-factor model of personality. It is used with normal population, both adults and adolescents. It consists of total 240 items. Moving ahead, 16 personality factor questionnaire, 16 PM. It is developed by British psychologist Gattel. It is based on 16 source traits of personality. It is originally developed in 1945, but it's it is thoroughly revised, and the current revision, I guess it's the 5th revision, is being used, and it is used for the age group of 16 and above. These 16 primary traits are on a continuum ranging from one end to the another end of the continuum. Okay, moving ahead is the Adolescent Personality Questionnaire, APQ, which is used for the age group 12 to 18 years, and it was earlier known as High School Personality Questionnaire. Moving to the next slide is Myers-Briggs Type Indicator Personality Assessment, MBTI. It is based on 4 dimensions: sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling, extroversion, introversion, and perceiving or judging. It is often used in career selection purposes, and these 4 dimensions together provide 16 personality types. Moving ahead, advantages and limitations of personality inventories. Advantages are: it is easy to take, it is easy to administer, it is easy to score and interpret. Okay, it is less time consuming. It can be administered in individual as well as group settings. It is susceptible to various response biases, and no intensive training is required to administer these personality inventories. Limitations are, it might have cultural influence, like different cultures have different meaning of words. Okay, respondent and participant must not respond in a responsible or sincere way. They might, say, true, false, A, B, C, D kind of answers they can give. And it might be possible that they give socially appropriate answer. Instead of who they are, they might be, saying that, it is not socially acceptable for me to say, give myself, I hate others. Suppose there is a question, I hate others, and you have to, suppose there is a question, I hate my mother. So, and there is a, you have to answer it in the most likely and less likely. So it might be possible that one might give a socially desired or socially appropriate answer instead of the honest answers. Okay. Moving ahead, other rating scales. Rating scales consist of standardized items that are to be rated on a fixed parameter. It involves assessing of ratings of the concerned individual himself or by other individual with regard to different aspects of personality of the individual. What are its advantages and limitations? Advantages are: rating by oneself will give a better picture of the behavior or the trait being assessed. Similarly, rating by significant other will also provide a more accurate picture of the personality of the individual, as they know the individual in a very significant way. And the limitation is social desirability effect. What do you mean by social desirability effect? Social desirability effect can be understood as, the individual or the, test giver or the respondent giving the responses that are socially desirable or socially acceptable, and not the honest answers. Moving ahead are the behavioral data. It is similar to the observation method, but it includes observation of the behavior of the individual. Okay, and the difference between the observation method and behavioral data is that it does not require a researcher or psychologist to be present in order to observe. Rather, the job is done by a device. Okay, moving ahead, the device is electronically activated record, which is ear. It was developed by May, Pennebaker, Crow, Dabbs, and Price in 2001, which is worn by the individual, and it is unobstructively monitors his or her real-world movement interactions. Moment-to-moment interactions. Okay, this device picks up the auditory information and relates to its personality traits. The ear device helps in having an objective assessment of personality as reflected in the day-to-day life. Moving ahead, advantages and limitations of behavioral data is, the advantages are as it provides an objective measurement in natural and real-world settings, and it is the person wearing the device goes on with his or her daily interactions, and the audio records can be used for analysis, and it offers a valuable source of real life information. But the limitation is that the person wearing the device may become conscious, and they might not behave in a way they would have naturally. Moving ahead, are situational tests, which involve assessing the individual in a very carefully designed situations. The behavior of the individual is observed in a purposefully designed situations. It was first used for selection of military personnel for critical overseas assignments during World War III. So in situational test, measures traits like altruism, honesty, and self-control. It is one of the variants of this test is situational stress test, which is like in which the individual has to react to various stressful, frustrating, or emotionally disruptive situations where his or her helpers are obstructive and uncooperative. So the responses or how the individual will react is recorded and then analyzed, like in various situations given to him or her. Moving ahead with the limitations and the advantages, first we will learn about the advantages. It helps to assess personality in real life situations. It also like in the natural settings, and it is a very controlled way of assessing through well-designed observations. Limitations are it is very time consuming, and it requires more energy and planning. They have to decide whether the observer will be participating or be a non-participant. The issue of what to observe during the situational test is very is the limitation of this test. Moving ahead are the projective techniques, which are widely used personality assessment tool, and the individual has to respond to an unstructured or ambiguous stimuli. And based on his or her responses, his personality is assessed on the psychoanalytic viewpoint. Okay, and according to the psychoanalytic viewpoint of personality, it says that the real nature of person lies in the unconsciousness. As we have already discussed, that according to the psychodynamic or psychoanalytic point of view in personality is the real nature of any individual can be understood by diving deep into its unconscious mind. Okay, it helps in tapping the unconscious and helps in revealing the personality of the subject through interpretation of these responses. Okay, and to interpret these results, a depth training is required. Okay, moving ahead, what are the assumptions in projective techniques? It assumes that by using unstructured test stimuli in projective test, the individual will project his or her latent or unconscious feelings, emotions, needs, or motives onto the ambiguous stimuli that is presented to him or her. Okay, then the responses of the individual in the form of projection will reflect the nature of his or her personality. Okay, and it also assumes that the individual personality can be accessed and revealed only through indirect methods. Are we clear here? Moving ahead, what does it involve? It involves making up a story. Okay, drawing or pictures are given and you have to make up a story. It is based on the assumption, as I told you, that the unconscious feelings, emotions, or thoughts are projected onto that picture or that story or that drawing that one made. Okay, and it will then be analyzed by the trained psychologist, and the personality of the individual will be reflected. Various projective techniques are Rorschach's in-block test, which was given by Rorschach in 1921, thematic apperception test, children apperception test, sentence completion test. We will understand about these tests in very brief. So let's move ahead. Rorschach ink-blot test. You can see like in the picture, there is an ink blot. This ink blot is one of the card from the Rorschach ink-blot test. Okay, it was developed by Rorschach in 1921. It consists of 10 ink blots, which shows ambiguous visual stimuli, as you can see behind me. Okay, it shows that like it is shown to the client one by one, and then the psychologist asked to to say whatever comes in their mind. Okay, and then the scoring is done on various elements of their responses. Whatever the element they describe, they have seen, or they have interpreted in the that after seeing that ink block, the scoring is done. Okay, so to administer Rorschach or to score the responses on the Rorschach test, one needs to be really trained. Moving ahead is thematic apperception test. It was developed by Murray and Morgan. It consists of 20 picture cards in black and white color, as you can see behind me. So the client is asked to see each picture, which are structured and meaningful, and they are asked to form a story about it and then tell them. Okay, it aims at identifying or measuring the motivational traits of the individuals, which according to them are reflected by the stories they form. Okay, moving ahead is the Indian adaptation of TAT, which was developed by Uma Chaudhary in 1960, which consists of 14 cards and it is modified for the Indian population. Next is Children Apperception Test, which is CAT. It was developed by Bellup and Bellup in 1949. It is, based on the TAT only. The pictures or the images on the TAT parts are meant for adults. CAT is, specifically designed for children from 3 to 10 years, which includes animal figures rather than the human figures. It is similar to the TAT, and, children are shown the cards and they are asked to form a story about it and tell them. Okay. Moving ahead is sentence completion test, which consists of various statements, and it must be completed by the respondent. It's like, I like dash. Or moving ahead are other projective techniques, which includes draw a person test and the Rosenwing picture frustration study. In a draw a person test, the test subject is asked to draw a person and images that one create, and then these images are assessed by the examiner. Okay. So in draw a person test, the test subject is asked to draw a person or images that, or the images, okay? And then those images are assessed by the examiner. The Rosenwing picture frustration study, in this, the subject is shown scene, okay, that consists of moderately frustrating situations, and the client is asked what that frustrated person depicted in the picture will do, or how that, how will the subject would react in if the similar situation is presented in front of him. The responses, given by the clients is then assessed. Next, moving ahead to the advantages and limitations of projective techniques. Advantages are that, the hidden aspects of personality, like unconscious motives, wishes, and conflicts come to the force. Okay. And hence, one can say that it reflects the true nature of one's personality. And what are the limitations? It is subjective in nature. The responses are entirely on the person. So it becomes very subjective to the test taker. It has low reliability and validity, as, the person's mood, environment affect their responses. And hence, it might not be reliable or valid in various situations. Okay. It is very time consuming and it requires skills and expertise to administer and scoring and interpretation. Okay. Moving ahead, let's discuss. Okay. I hope you all are clear with the personality assessments and, what are the ethical guidelines and what are the good measures of the test and what are the various personality assessments. Okay. So let's discuss the questions now. What are the areas in which the personality assessment is used? I have told you that there are various areas in which the personality assessment is used, like education, career planning, defense and military, in organizational setup, in industrial structures. You can explain about them a little bit. Next, discuss the ethical guidelines for psychological assessment. Ethical guidelines are given by APA, American Psychological Association, and it includes that it should be done by psychologists. It is unethical to use a psychologist test without a formal training or degree, and the informed consent should be taken before administering any psychological assessment, and the confidentiality of the findings of the test should be maintained, and one should be able to, communicate the test results in a very proper way, and we need to, be aware of the test taking situation and the ethnic and the cultural background of the client. Explain any two methods of personality assessment, which is a previous year question. So you can explain any two, personality assessment, like observation, interviews, questionnaires, rating scales, behavioral data, situational test, or any of the personality inventories, or even projective techniques. Next question is, what is observer effect, which can be understood as the, it was one of the limitation of the observation method, which is a direct method of personality assessment, and it refers to the effect on the person because of the fact of being observed. Okay, the person might become conscious and may not show their natural responses as they have already known that they are being observed. Okay, moving ahead is the halo effect. Halo effect is one of the limitations in the interview method, which is a tendency of the interviewer, which is the tendency of the interviewee to, form positive impressions. Okay, moving ahead with the next question. Projective techniques are based on which approach to personality? Okay, I think you know the answer. First, projective techniques are based on the psychoanalytic view of personality. I hope you all understand this unit really well. Thank you and have a nice day.